Good morning. This is just going to be a 30-minute broadcast, vocal, no guitar, not this time. Just Monday morning commentary, first take.
Hello and a very warm welcome to all who are joining us in the United States and right around the world. I'm Lisa Squires in London and just ahead right here on CNN News.
The forces continue to build up along the Ukrainian border. Right now, we're seeing dogged diplomacy almost every day.
Diplomacy
There's a conversation across the Atlantic, Russia, U.S., Europe.
The news is being prepared, and it's around Ukraine right now as we speak.
It could happen as soon as tomorrow,
Graphics
or it
department
could take some weeks.
overtime for this one.
As Russian troops continue to amass on Ukraine's border, the French president heads to Russia looking to thaw tensions. We're live in Kiev at Moscow this hour.
Tanks in the
Plus,
snow.
China's tennis star Peng Shuai breaks her silence, dismissing allegations of sexual assault. We're live in Beijing with details on her recent meeting with the IOC. And gun salute for the Queen as she celebrates 70 years on the throne. We're live outside of Buckingham Palace this hour.
Next time I'll play the guitar, jam some.
Live from London, this is CNN Newsroom with Lisa Suarez.
It's always interesting to see what the Monday morning news
Welcome
is.
to the show, everyone. It is Monday, February 7th, and this hour, a pivotal meeting is set to get underway in Moscow in an effort really to defuse the crisis and avert possible war in Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron will try to convince his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, to pull back and abandon any plans to invade Ukraine. Even as U.S. officials are convinced an attack could happen at any time. And then later today, U.S. President Joe Biden will hold talks with Germany's Chancellor at the White House. Olaf Scholz is facing fierce criticism for his handling of this crisis. President Biden spoke with Mr. Macron on Sunday, and both leaders discussed responses to Russia's military build-up. Now, new satellite images show Russia's deployments in Belarus for joint exercises. We're looking at those. Some of the Russian camps are close to Ukraine's border. Ukraine is still downplaying the threat. The foreign minister urged people not to believe what he calls apocalyptic predictions. The US, though, is not swayed. Honestly.
We believe that there is a very distinct possibility that Vladimir Putin will order an attack on Ukraine. It could take a number of different forms. It could happen as soon as tomorrow, or it could take some weeks yet. He has put himself in a position with military deployments to be able to act aggressively against Ukraine at any time. If they choose to go down the path of escalation instead,
Russia
it will
and
come at
Ukraine and
enormous
China
human
being on the
cost
same page.
to Ukrainians, but it will also, we believe, over time, come at real strategic cost to Vladimir Putin.
So it's hard to tell which countries want to be on the U.S. side and which countries the U.S. just wants on their side.
Another 80 plus tons of solidarity. Some of the first U.S. reinforcement troops have arrived from Poland. Washington is also
I
prepared.
haven't heard Ukrainian polls about how many want to be in Russia
On a daily basis,
Federation,
Russian financial
or
institutions
how many
do
want to
about
join NATO.
$46 billion worth of financial
Their
transactions.
leaders
around the
mentions
world.
wanting to join NATO.
80% of those transactions are in dollars.
But those
So
numbers are
they're
important. Back
connected to
in
the U.S. financial system.
Crimea, there
But
was
their
over
biggest
90%
trading
of the
partners
people
in Europe,
going
more
to
than
be part of
$200
the Russian
billion
Federation.
of trades with Europe each year. 40% of Russia's trades with Europe on a daily
95% or
basis.
something.
The United States and Europe acting together, we put ourselves in a position where we not only have an impact on the
So
overall
next,
Russian economy, but we have a direct impact on President Putin, who is tied to the Russian economy.
Important perspective there. Well, as you can imagine, CNN has reporters covering all angles of this. Isabel Rosales is following the troop deployment at Fort Worth in North Carolina. We'll get to that in a
Russia
few
laid the
minutes.
infrastructure there and
Secretary
built
Melissa Bell has joined us in Kyiv. And Nick Robertson in Moscow. And Nick, good morning. Let me start with you this hour. We have been seeing for several weeks now a diplomatic activity, a flurry of diplomatic activity.
This must mean that they're not too, or he's not, is not so unforgivable if they won't even talk to him.
Yeah, it's hugely important. The tensions do continue to build up around Ukraine because of the positioning of U.S. forces, or rather Russian forces, and the uncertainty about what they're going to do. Russia, of course, says they're not going to invade. That we've just heard from a number of US officials there whose assessment is contrary to that. So this is very important. It does seem as if President Macron has been able to make, let's not call it headway, but let's call it consistent conversation with President Putin. The Kremlin describes him, according to President Macron's office, described him as a quality interlocutor. They've had 3 phone calls just over the past week. One of them was quite lengthy, a couple of hours, perhaps longer than President Putin has had a phone call with any other European leader. So there is hope that these two can sit down with some sense of conversation and understanding on the table in front of them. But the realities are the gaps are huge. You know, President Macron has said one of the things he wants to do is to get a reduction in tensions around Ukraine. And whether that is a perception of what those tensions are or a real reduction, you know, he's framed that, or the Elysee Palace is framing that cautiously in diplomatic terms. It gives President Putin potentially a little bit of wiggle room. The reality is President Putin is committing himself and his forces in such a way to create the impression that if he doesn't get what he wants at the table, then there are military alternatives. And his senior officials over the past month have said similar things. So it's into this
can't possibly be the most important
President Macron is coming. And even his office say, don't expect rapid results today. How long they meet, that's going to be important. It will expect a press conference later in the day as well. And of course, that will be absolutely key to kind of read what went on behind closed doors.
And of course, we shall bring that press conference to you as soon as it gets underway. Nick, do stay with us. Let me go to Melissa. Melissa, this meeting between Putin and Macron is coming as new satellite images show Russian deployments in several locations. I think we showed our viewers those deployments around Belarus. How is this ramping up of troops and equipment that we're seeing now on our air, the satellite images being received where you are?
Well, Ukrainian officials continue to urge caution in our reading of that, and we've seen a slight difference of tone in terms of the assessment between Washington and Kyiv. And again this weekend, Ukrainian officials say, look, for the time being, we don't believe that critical steps are being taken for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. But clearly, the movements on the other side of the Belarus border, and you're talking about a border that is a couple of hours' drive away from where I'm standing now, is extremely worrying to the United States. Because until the world works out precisely what Vladimir Putin intends to do, and I think everyone recognizes that no one really has any great reading on that, until the world works out what he intends to do, there is the point of what he can do. And with those troop movements that we're seeing, not only are there satellite images, but videos that have been posted over the course of the weekend that show substantial movement of weapons just north of that Ukrainian border, 15 kilometers north of that Ukrainian border in Belarus, which really opens another front and not comfortably close to the Ukrainian capital. That will continue to preoccupy everyone who's watching the situation unfold. Vladimir Putin continuing to fortify Russian military positions just north of the border, and this close to the capital really does suggest that time, that window that exists for diplomacy is narrowing, and certainly putting pressure on all of those involved in the talks that will happen both in Moscow today.
We should talk about what these countries want to do if Russia shuts down all the gas and oil exports.
Well, as we reported, the US military is moving forward with President Biden's orders to deploy troops and equipment to reinforce NATO allies in Eastern Europe. Isabel Rosales has more on that.
Ukraine looks like going to be the first one on the list.
I'm standing right now inside of the reception area, about a football field away from those large military aircraft that are taking them overseas. So right behind me, these soldiers, they are waiting to be deployed, and it can be a waiting game until they get that final order. It can be hours spent maybe napping, packing, reading, playing cards. But when it is go time, that focus, that training, it kicks in. In total, 2,000 soldiers will deploy from right here in Belgrade. 300 of them from the 15th Airborne. They're already in Germany. But they're still working on deploying the 82nd Airborne. Altogether, 1,700 soldiers from that division will go to Poland. And inside of those large C-17 planes,
some of the European countries are getting closer to being on totally renewable energy.
These soldiers will conduct drills
getting closer and closer, and that's their goal. All of them.
According to a spokesman of the 82nd Airborne,
Some of them depend on some Russian.
So we're there to assure
our allies and to reinforce our ironclad commitment to our European allies. We cannot really anticipate the future. We hope that our president will assure our allies that we're committed to a safe and stable Europe.
These soldiers are headed to Europe, and they don't have a timeline as to when they'll be able to return home. The Pentagon is calling this mission temporary, but it's not ruling out that they might send even more troops. 8,500 of them, aside from these 3,000, are on heightened alert there, at the ready for any order from the president and the Pentagon.
They said there's like 3,000 troops already.
Thanks to the Belmont, Moscow's military build-up continues to raise fears among NATO allies that a Russian invasion of Ukraine is imminent. Earlier, CNN asked a member of the U.S. House Armed Services Committee and a former U.S. Army official to weigh in on these concerns. Have a listen.
And they switched some of the
Vladimir
lines.
Putin is not only moving massive amounts of combat power and mobilizing his reserves,
They keep
but
giving
you
us this
also look at what type of forces are being moved into place in the supporting forces. The tanks, the battalion tactical groups, as Russia calls it, are one thing, but actually putting in the
A nationwide insurrection. This is
GoFundMe to
outrage,
refund
and
$10 million
people should be
in
mad.
Canada.
Quickly, GoFundMe, when you take $10
Yeah, I read
million,
about this.
that's called theft. Vice President
What's his
Kamala
name?
Harris,
Governor
once again,
DeSantis
the midterms and find more roles.
told GoFundMe that they shouldn't just take these people's donations.
The VP's new staffers can help elevate the platform. Harris
You
lost
like
more
give
than a
some of them
handful of key
back, and then
staffers
they
during
said
her
they
first
belong
year
to them.
in office.
House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is outlining the probes the GOP plans to pursue if they regain the House in midterms.
Some people should be just because GoFundMe didn't deal with these truckers'
We'll
politics.
investigate the
They're not gonna let
AG's
them get
research into
fundraising
calling
on their
parents terrorists. We'll investigate Afghanistan. Afghanistan withdrawal. Why did we have 13 new Gold Star families? Because this president closed Bagram that allowed a suicide bomber out
I've never
that
used
killed
GoFundMe.
the individual. There is a lot of places that we can hold them accountable.
Meanwhile, 21 House Republicans are accusing the Biden administration and health officials of, quote, stonewalling efforts to get to the bottom of COVID's origins. The lawmakers are demanding HHS and the NIH turn over long-requested documents on the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It's like deja vu. Rules for thee and not for me. Democrats' mask hypocrisy caught on camera as Stacey Abrams and Congressman Jamal Bowman are caught maskless.
Yeah, this isn't a repeat. We keep doing this. They keep doing this, I should say. Brooke Saban is live with the Dems response. Hey, Brooke.
Hey, good morning, guys. What we have here is a classic case of do as I say, not as I do.
This stuff really doesn't entertain me.
That are occurring in China at the moment.
So how do you interpret the fact that one of the two athletes that lit the torch was from,
Maybe
at
it's
least according to the
because it just has
Chinese
to look like
government, the Uyghur community?
Well, needs to distract us from the real issue here at hand, that Uyghurs are being tortured. And Uyghurs
Prove it.
are,
Show one of them being tortured, for
victims
Christ's
of
sake.
human rights violations.
You see millions of these
by,
people are being
by the
tortured.
Chinese. And,
So there's millions of people starving in Venezuela. And so our solution is to just try to hurt them financially.
Over the safety of U.S. athletes in Beijing.
Jesus.
I can reassure U.S. athletes that the United States government will be standing with them in China, and we will be there to protect them.
After a while, I mean, it goes pretty thin. So we're just standing idly while these people are just
There's also
being tortured.
spotlight after
And these
sitting
other
out
people are
for
starving day in, day out.
in Beijing. Peng made headlines
And
last
we'll
week
give billions of dollars to somebody else
top
for
Chinese
something else.
official of sexual assault,
Seems like
then
they could
disappeared
resell
from
these,
public view. She since denied
if they actually
making the
exist.
allegations and doubled down during the interview. One of these
I
journalists
haven't
asked,
seen them. I don't know why I
in
should
the
believe
text
that
we
they
could see in
exist.
Europe, you accuse someone of sexual
The
assault.
protesters in
What did you
Venezuela
really
are
write?
all
We
fed
don't
away,
understand.
all of them on the
And
street.
Peng answers, sexual assault. I never said anyone sexually assaulted me in any way. For more, let's bring in CNN Stephen Zhang live in Beijing. And Stephen, this is fascinating. The first
The U.S. angry at China about the Uyghurs is like,
but this was a
I don't know,
carefully managed
Protestant
interview.
angry at the
What more
Pope.
can you tell us from that interview that she did with Lucy?
Well, he's addition to again denying she's ever made sexual assault allegations against former
They want an apology or for them to recant or
acknowledge a years long affair with him, though,
I don't know.
saying that her lifelong
Dancing
problems,
tune
personal
probably
problems,
not
should
going
not
to
be
get
mixed
you
in
rich.
sports and politics. And also seemed to confirm she did write the original explosive account.
It's kind of like the big lie thing and the voting fraud thing.
After it started attracting worldwide attention.
I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, and so when I see
Women's Tennis Association, which of course has
people that say there's voting fraud, I want to know if it's true or not.
Concerns over her safety. She says she personally
the courts
goes back to them, even though there are a lot of doubts about the authenticity of her email. Now, she insists that she's been safe, well, and free all this time, and that she had never disappeared. But to the point that this was such a rare interview, now remember, this is only the second time she spoke to a foreign media outlet, and this time it's a well-respected but highly specialized sports publication.
But if it did happen, I think I'd be acting
to one of the reporters who did the interview, and they said there was no overt effort to censor her on location, even though there were Chinese minors present, but they did allow the incident to go much longer than planned, and also allow the reporters to ask questions off the script.
Countries like 50 different countries.
They did observe the difference in her demeanor when she was talking about tennis and sports. She appeared a lot more relaxed. Then she just tensed up and watching her own work very carefully, keeping answers short when responding to the allegations about the sexual assault. Now, probably not unexpected, but this is really going to show that international storm. The original post created is just not going to stop or even subside, despite this interview or that meeting or dinner she had with IOC President Fox. In the minds of so many people around the world, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for her to write what she did and then now just insisting the whole thing was a big
court system. I think it's like one of the last true institutions where you can trust. You can't trust court system and free school.
Coming up right here on CNN Newsroom, a state of emergency in Ottawa, Canada, after protests over vaccine mandate and COVID restrictions stretch into its second weekend. We have the latest for you just ahead. Also ahead, the U.S. Northeast has already seen plenty of snow, and right now,
they should get those voting machines that Trump is worried about and check them out. He's thought about seizing or wants to seize, just said
more than 15 million Americans are being hit through weather alerts this morning in portions of Philadelphia. Some early morning freezing drizzle possible, travel disruptions. We'll touch on this and the potential for the storm to end up around areas of the Northeast. After this in a couple minutes.
You know, because if I understand it correctly, he thinks that those voting machines didn't count all the votes for him, and they gave more votes to Biden. And so that was his deal. He wanted to seize them to figure it out. So I don't understand why somebody in Congress hasn't seized them or written a bill or whatever. Or a governor is probably more like it. A governor of a state could issue an order to seize the voting machines, to have them minimized. But they haven't. A lot of Republicans are on board with this voter fraud nonsense, and some of them that aren't that on board. But I think it's something you have to get to the bottom of, and it can't be up in the air. You gotta be confident, or you gotta fix it. And so since, both stations are showing commercials. Just two are on right now, the CNN and Fox. MSNBC's Morning Joe still rubbing the crust out of his eyes. Weekly Joe and Willie. Good makeup. Just good. Yeah, like they're showing some crazy stuff on TV. Well, I'm going to comment for about 15 more minutes on the most important news in the U.S. because they repeat themselves usually after 30 minutes, and I don't get paid for this. So, I'm just joking. Yeah, that's interesting how 10-15 minutes were occupied by information about foreign countries sticking a bunch of their military on the edge of their land somewhere far away. Like that's supposed to change my behavior when I hear that? Or am I supposed to feel a certain way, say something, do something? I think part of it is they just try to justify the exorbitant, extraordinary, ungodly 700 billion plus budget for the Pentagon. So when there's bullshit like this that comes up in the news and bounces around for a while, that's kind of the side effect, I imagine, with the people that want that answer. Will justify it real easily with shit like this. The Hegseths of the world.
Anger over COVID measures is spreading across Canada as demonstrations spill into a new week. The mayor of Ottawa issuing a state of emergency to get a handle on protests in full control. CNN's Paul Newton has
all these other dumb countries and
the protests here against the COVID-19 measures started in Ottawa, but it spread right across the country. Sunday was much quieter than Saturday, but we still had hundreds of tractor trailers and other trucks and thousands of people spread out from one side of the country to the other, demanding an end to those COVID-19 restrictions. Now, this started out as a truckers' protest. They were against vaccine mandates to actually cross the border into the United States. This has turned into so much more. People saying that they are fed up with the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, the lockdowns, the health restrictions. They just want it to end. It is a minority, but it is a very
Ottawa declares state-of-emergency over demonstrations. Parts of Canadian capital shut down by protests against COVID measures. Well, this has been happening all over the country, actually.
City of
This is
Ottawa,
probably the closest one to the U.S.
emergency, but I really want you to listen to the police chief here when he spoke this weekend about the city. Take a listen.
The oath of office that I and my officers swore were never intended to deal with a city under siege, a threat to our democracy, a nationwide insurrection driven by madness. There is no concrete plan.
It's funny, there's very different types of Canadians. There's the
They are really categorizing this as an occupation now, and although Ottawa police say they will begin enforcement, very police forces and leaders right across the country are keeping a close eye on what happens in the city and seeing if, in fact, protesters do decide to finally leave, or if this will continue to spread like a contagion, really.
bridge too far.
On CNN, Ottawa.
Thank you, Paula. Well, in the US, 18 snowmobilers had to be rescued after a huge chunk of ice broke away from land in Lake Erie. 7 were lifted away from the iceberg by helicopters. You can see that. The rest was rescued by airboats.
That's not exactly what we have here, but it kind of is. They're just the ones that don't get hurt the most, probably, because they're the independents.
Had warned earlier that conditions were dangerous and had urged people to stay off the ice around the lake shore. 10 Cuban migrants have been rescued from a sinking boat off the Florida coast. The U.S. Coast Guard says a group was spotted further about 40 miles and 65 kilometers off the Key Largo. The Largo did not have life jackets. You can see that all safety.
The truckers go everywhere, so
they
who knows what truckers' fault it's
Cuba. Millions of Americans across parts of the Northeast are under a winter alert with some snow and ice forecast through Tuesday morning.
They're isolated for so many hours by themselves.
Harry has the latest forecast. Good morning, John.
I understand why they would have to get that, especially if they were rules to wear masks, too.
Across what's happening in the western U.S., where it's generally quiet, Santa Ana winds beginning to kick up there across the southwest.
Truck stop for a few minutes or something.
Also quiet, but there is a disturbance marked off portions of the southeast, and the elements are in place for this system.
See, yeah, that's why I
to
don't.
eventually bring us
It doesn't
into
resonate
weather
with
across
me
parts
when
of
they
the
do
Northeast
the
and
irate,
some
like,
freezing drizzle
oh, we
into
saw
this
them with no
morning
mask
across
kind of
parts
thing.
of Philly Metro and
Because I think we should all be
could
on the
be
same
impacted by this.
damn page.
We'll have a closer look.
Never
Already
ever wear a
seeing
mask
take place
unless
across
it's
parts of New
required.
Jersey. You'd be surprised
And
to
if
get
it's required and they
freezing
make you
rain,
wear a
some
mask,
freezing
you wear a
across
mask.
parts of
That's
Philly.
it. That's all you
The
gotta do.
system does gradually
You don't just
edge
do it
across
for fun.
portions of
You
the
just don't
Northeast.
do it just by
Don't see
choice.
this as a blockbuster event.
Do it if you have a health problem or something, or if you're sick, or you stay home if you're sick.
Generally on the lighter end of things, a couple of inches, but get up northern areas which they made.
But yeah, so see, it just doesn't. It's like, well,
more across that region. Now, we are
if it was
approaching the
because
middle
they
of
broke the
February.
law, if they broke the law, that's one thing.
Of Arctic
If they
Hill
broke the rule, that's another thing.
Chicago,
And if they
that's
just
climbing up
voluntarily didn't
the 43 mark with
wear
some
masks
snow showers
or
possible
something,
there Friday, but you'll notice
who
the bottom
cares?
drops out, drop about 10 or so degrees below average by this weekend. After on the southwest, yes, this offshore wind certainly picking up, these downsloping winds, 50 to even 60 miles per hour. Some power outage disruptions possible across this region, but the temperature trend also going to be impressive here, as is often the case with these downsloping winds. Could see these temps climb up well above average.
So yeah, they've got some preconceptions, I think, and that's that they've been guilting people into wearing masks when they don't have to wear masks.
Right around 70 degrees. National
And
perspective.
they think that people
Rapid
won't
City will
have
be
them
60,
listen.
Minneapolis only
It's been
21
kind of
degrees.
a real weird thing.
Highs
Because
at around
CNN's viewership is very strange,
Thank you very much.
and so their broadcasts are very strange.
Underway in Madagascar.
And the broadcasts tell me about their viewership.
Made landfall on Saturday. The storm left behind major damage and came on the heels of Tropical Storm Anna, which hit the area just weeks ago, killing dozens of people. Now residents are facing even more devastation and finding themselves in desperate need of basic necessities like clean water. Coming up right here on CNN, Britain's Queen Elizabeth used her Platinum Jubilee to elevate the status of a woman once at the centre of a royal scandal. We'll find out how it's playing with the British people. And you are looking at live pictures of Capitol Hill, where two senators are working together to update as well as strengthen a 19th century election law. We'll have the details for you after the break.
Nice.
Calling out U.S. companies for bankrolling the Olympics and turning a blind eye to China's human rights abuses. Wait until you hear how the network is actually defending, or at least trying to, that decision when we come back.
Yikes. Here's Drake commercial. This is part for the first. Alright, well, I think I'm going to shut it off now. That story looks dumb. Wow. You know, and we hope and wish that people are informed and they woke up and watched this news station and not informed. So I hope people get the news elsewhere. Funny how Joe Rogan has so many people listening to his podcast and CNN's ratings are in the toilet. Yeah, I think CNN thrives on like violence and Trump and just crazy stuff happening. And when things aren't, there's no reason to tune in, people don't. I noticed, I started watching a whole lot in 2012 when I was studying journalism, and I noticed it looked like they were catering a bit to a black demographic. And I think that had to do with the Obama administration. I think more African American people were tuning in when he was president. So they gained those viewers. And of course, just liberals, Democrats, has been their bread and butter.